Very well, let's see what you have here.
I should tell you, sir, that this time around my team and I spent tremendous efforts working thoroughly on the development for this project. I am anticipating that you'll be very, very pleased.
Let's not jump to conclusions, shall we? Now, show me what you've got.
We have developed a computer simulation for the evolution of a new planet. We've started from the creation of solids and gases, oceans and land, then organic molecules, and
Hydrogen, nitrogen, and a carbon model.
yes, sir, then higher level organic life, plants and animals, and finally, a creature with great intellectual potential, surpassing all of the other species that came before it. We call it the human.
This creature, how did you go about creating it? What is its origin?
It's also organic, sir.
Obviously, I mean, how did you model its intellect?
The intellect, sir, was modeled after our group of 10.
Sava, you are aware that 25 is the minimum number of participants required to extrapolate results. Are you not?
Mr. Toffles, we figured that this sample population would suffice considering the short amount of time allotted for the development.
Well then, carry on. How did you approach creation of its moral values?
I'm glad that you asked. The Covenant. It's a set of moral laws that we put in place for them to follow.
I see. Not only did you enforce rules of conduct, but you gave them an entire book of good behavior. And how did you manage to give this to them?
Well, the content is usually uploaded during their sleep in the form of a sequence of virtual images flashing through their conscious. Of course, we pick the most mentally unstable subjects. Their psyches are more volatile, and this results in a less resistant execution. However, in this case, I just gave it to them. Not physically, of course. Obviously, I cannot appear inside the simulation. Instead, we created our own character inside of the simulation. This was quite expensive in terms of resources, but at times, its usage is justifiable.
Why? How did you manage? What did you use to deliver the book?
We picked a bush and then we set it on fire. I called it the burning bush. In contrast with our humans, it's an interface device of relatively low difficulty. And all we needed was an organic heat source and a voice modulator.
And on other occasions?
On other occasions, it depended on the difficulty of the task. Sometimes we had to introduce the full-fledged character subject. Of course, we couldn't just create him the regular way, as a result of male-female sexual interaction. The way our general evolutionary model works, because this character had to have a direct moral and intellectual manipulation control. Physiologically, of course, it was a human being, but his psyche was different.
Ah, yes, I see what you've done. An artificial insemination with a female donor. What a banal concept. Nevertheless, it seems practical. Continue. How did it work out?
It worked out good as far as the introduction of the custom character was concerned. The paradigm as a whole did display some flaws, but the character served its purpose.
Sava. My concern has to do with your manual intervention in the design of this evolutionary process. Ultimately, a good system should be debugged and work without manual intervention. However, with your book, it's nothing short on intervention. Here, for instance, you speak of changing the sheep's color, water into wine, and walking on water. What is this? Blasphemous hacking.
Well, Mr. Toffles, we struggled with quite a predicament here. You see, unless what they're viewing is supernatural, the humans, they don't give special significance to the events we've presented, not to mention their primitive initial state of development. We were forced to introduce trickery in order to captivate their attention and prove our power.
Other times, however, the manual interventions were much more significant. Here, I've noticed that you created 10 different unnatural disasters. And here, did I understand this correctly? You parted The Red Sea?
There was no other way around it. We had to save the chosen people from Pharaoh's wrath.
Chosen people? What's this all up? Ah, and yet another design glitch. You've zeroed out the entire planet's population?
We ran into some problems. Our subjects' genotypes were contaminated due to the influence of my peers, who sabotaged the project. They began creating their own characters and placed them into the simulation. They did so without my consent, as well as circumventing the necessary tests. This resulted in the special beings intermixing with locals, which led to tremendous moral degradation and a disruption of the algorithm. They went against all reason, these special beings. Were excessively promiscuous and performed acts of incest and homosexuality.
Sava, are you homophobic?
No, Mr. Tofflees. On the contrary, I voted to implement homosexuality as a mechanism for curbing population growth as an alternative to epidemic disease and war. Yet this wasn't supposed to take effect until the population started growing uncontrollably.
Does this point have a conclusion, Sava?
Because of the low standards that the special beings impose on the morally stable population, we decided to fix this problem with reinitialization. It would be much easier to preserve several carriers of the previous genotype with high moral standards, the cream of the crop, so to speak, and eliminate everyone else. Then, simply remultiply the entire population.
I am not sure that I can approve such a system. Having to reinitialize itself in such a drastic manner. I'm kind of curious as to the mechanics of it. How did you manage to do this?
I should tell you, Professor Tofflees, that during the execution of the flood, we realized that this was quite a difficult and cumbersome task in itself.
The book only mentions that the havens were opened, without explaining how it was done. Considering that the water was raised to 15 cubits as written here, how on earth did you propose to drain all of it?
It was quite simple, sir. Rather than flooding the entire planet, we administered a local flood.
And what kind of locality did you choose?
The same locality that was densely populated, the Mediterranean region, Mesopotamia, and the Middle East.
How did you manage to encircle this region?
The water was naturally contained by Pyrenees, Alps, Caucasus, the high coastline of North Africa, and other existing mountains. For the remaining territories, we triggered a series of earthquakes and volcanic eruptions around the perimeter of the region and reshaped its topography to allow for an encircled basin.
Is it not true that in your system a random algorithm governs volcanic eruptions and earthquakes? How could we be sure that the water would be contained in the resulting boundaries?
We created a feedback loop, tested the integrity of the encasement, and executed the eruption algorithm until the encasement was complete.
The Mediterranean, Mesopotamia, Southern Europe, all the way to the Alps and the Caucasus, then Egypt and the Arabian Peninsula. How were you able to generate so much water?
We heated the Atlantic, nearby the Gibraltar.
How exactly?
We forged a hole in the Earth's crust and let the hot lava pour into the water, creating vapor. This normalized the ocean levels after the flood was over. All we had to do was open the Gibraltar Dam gradually, so that after flooding, the water would drain straight into the ocean through the course of more than a year.
Wouldn't these underwater eruptions generate a gigantic cataclysm all over the planet?
Only to a small degree, due to the small size of the orifice that was open, along with the lava which was ejected at a controlled rate.
And what about preserving the fauna? Here in the book, you're stating that the Ark kept, quote, 2 of each kind. If so, how could you substantiate such a claim? Never mind the fact that you had to feed all the animals for the course of over a year. How, for example, did you deliver polar bears, penguins, and all the marsupials from Australia to the Ark? Did kangaroos just hop their way through the Indian Ocean? Huh? And then 2 of each kind? What about subspecies? For example, which elephant did you save, African or Indian?